How far would you go to save the person you love? I was only 7 years old when I discovered my mother sobbing in the hallway. The sound was what caught my attention first. This raw, broken noise I never heard from her before. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, newspapers spread across her lap, frantically circling job listings with a red pen that was running out of ink. Her hand was shaking so badly the circles looked more like scribbles. My little brother was 4 at the time, still napping in his room, completely unaware that anything was wrong. But I knew, even at 7, I could feel that something fundamental had shifted in our home, like the ground beneath our feet had suddenly become unstable. I approached her slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal, afraid of what might happen if I got too close. "Mom," my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Why are you crying?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before: fear. Real, bone-deep terror. She tried to wipe her tears away quickly, smearing mascara across her cheeks, and forced a smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. "I need to find work, sweetie," she said, her voice cracking. "I need to find a job right away." I stared at her, completely confused. "But why? Dad has a job. You stay home with us." She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. I could see her struggling to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old, words that wouldn't frighten me even more than I already was. Finally, she just pulled me into a tight hug and whispered, "We just need a little extra help right now, okay? Everything's going to be fine." But I knew she was lying. I could feel it in the way she held me. Too tight, too desperate, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. That Thanksgiving felt unbearably strange. We had all the traditional food on the table: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. But it might as well have been cardboard for all the joy it brought. Heavy silence filled every room of our house, pressing down on us like a physical weight. Dad sat at the head of the table, staring at his plate without eating. Mom kept trying to make conversation, asking my brother and me about school, about our friends, about anything that might break the terrible quiet. But her voice sounded hollow and forced. I remember watching Dad that day, really watching him, and realizing he looked different. His face was gray and drawn, his eyes distant and unfocused. He'd lost weight I hadn't noticed him losing. When my brother asked him to pass the rolls, it took 3 tries before he even heard the question. It was like he was there, but not there, present in body, but absent in every other way that mattered. Mom had found a night shift job at a packaging warehouse. Within 2 weeks of that day, I found her in the hallway. She chose nights specifically so she could still be with us during the day, still take us to school, still help with homework, still tuck us in at bedtime. Then, as soon as Dad came home from his job, if he went that day, she'd leave for hers. I didn't understand the full weight of what she was doing then. I didn't understand that she was essentially working 24 hours a day with maybe 3 or 4 hours of broken sleep snatched here and there. I didn't understand that she was slowly destroying herself to hold our family together. Dad withdrew completely into himself. He'd come home and go straight to the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Sometimes I'd hear him in there, pacing back and forth for hours. Other times, there was just silence, which somehow felt worse. He barely spoke to anyone anymore. When he did, his words came out flat and lifeless, like they required more energy than he had to give. The few times I tried to talk to him, to show him a drawing I'd made, or tell him about something that happened at school, he'd look at me with this expression of profound sadness mixed with something else I couldn't identify. Years later, I realized it was guilt. He felt guilty for not being able to be the father he wanted to be, guilty for the burden he'd placed on Mom, guilty for existing at all. Mom was always exhausted. Her eyes developed permanent dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. Her skin took on a grayish pallor. She moved through the house like a ghost, going through the motions of daily life on pure willpower and nothing else. I'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and find her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, just staring at nothing, trying to gather enough strength to get through another day. Our once tidy home became cluttered and chaotic. Laundry piled up in baskets, clean and dirty mixed together because there was no time to put anything away. Dishes sat in the sink for days. Dust collected on surfaces that used to shine. The yard, which Dad had always maintained meticulously, became overgrown and wild. Our home, which had always felt warm and welcoming, started to feel neglected and sad, a physical reflection of what was happening to our family. Mom's delicious home-cooked meals were replaced with greasy fast food and frozen dinners. She simply didn't have the time or energy anymore to spend hours in the kitchen preparing the elaborate meals she used to make. I missed her pot roast, her homemade bread, her chocolate chip cookies that were always slightly underdone in the middle. exactly the way I like them. Now we ate chicken nuggets and French fries, pizza from boxes, sandwiches thrown together in 30 seconds. My brother was too young to fully understand what was happening. He knew mom was tired and dad was sad, but he adapted the way young children do, accepting this new reality as normal because he had nothing else to compare it to. But I was old enough to remember how things used to be, old enough to feel the loss acutely. I tried to help where I could. I'd make my brother breakfast before school, simple things like cereal or toast. I'd help him get dressed and brush his teeth. I tried to keep our room clean so mom would have one less thing to worry about. I became 7 going on 17, taking on responsibilities no child should have to carry. This went on for several painful years, years that felt like decades. I watched my mother grow dangerously thin, her body consuming itself because she rarely had time to eat proper meals. The stress and severe sleep deprivation were literally killing her. I could see it happening in slow motion. Her hands developed a tremor. She'd forget things constantly, appointments, permission slips, conversations we'd just had. Her hair started falling out in clumps. I was terrified I was going to lose her. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway for her night shift, wondering if she'd fall asleep at the wheel, wondering if she'd come home. Sometimes I'd sneak out of bed and watch from the window until I saw her headlights return in the early morning, just to know she was safe. Dad continued to deteriorate. There were days he didn't get out of bed at all. Days he'd call in sick to work, though he wasn't physically ill, at least not in any way I understood then. Mom would check on him constantly, bringing him water, trying to get him to eat something, anything. I'd hear her in their room, speaking to him in low, gentle tones, though I could never make out the words. Then, when I turned 10, something shifted. Mom suddenly quit her night job, just like that, with no warning or explanation. I came home from school one day, and she was there, actually rested for the first time in years, with an expression on her face I hadn't seen in forever, something like hope. Slowly, almost miraculously, normalcy returned to our lives. The change didn't happen overnight, but gradually, like watching a time-lapse of flower blooming. The house was clean again, surfaces gleaming, everything in its proper place. We ate real meals together at the dinner table. Pot roast, homemade bread, those perfect chocolate chip cookies. My parents actually seemed happy, or at least content. They'd talk to each other again, really talk, not just exchange necessary information. Sometimes I'd even hear them laughing. Dad started coming back to life. The color returned to his face. He'd play with my brother and me again, help with homework, ask about our days, and actually listen to the answers. He started maintaining the yard again, and I'd watch him from my window, methodically mowing the lawn, trimming the hedges, planting flowers. There was something almost meditative about the way he worked, like he was rebuilding himself one small task at a time. Mom gained back the weight she'd lost. The tremor in her hands disappeared. Her hair grew back thick and shiny. Most importantly, the fear left her eyes, replaced by something calmer, steadier. She seemed at peace in a way I hadn't seen since before that day. I found her crying in the hallway. I didn't ask questions. I was just grateful to have my family back, to feel safe and stable again. I pushed those dark years into the back of my mind, tried to forget the fear and confusion and helplessness I'd felt. I wanted to believe it was all behind us, that whatever storm had nearly destroyed us had finally passed. Years went by. I went through middle school, then high school. My brother grew from a confused 4-year-old into a bright, happy kid who barely remembered those difficult years. Our family continued to heal and grow strong. Dad got promoted at work. Mom started taking painting classes, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. We took vacations, celebrated holidays with genuine joy, built new memories to replace the painful ones. I was 17, almost ready to leave for college, when Mom finally told me the truth. We were sitting on the back porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dad had taken my brother to a baseball game, so it was just the two of us. She'd been quiet for a while, and I could tell something was weighing on her mind. "There's something I need to tell you," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "About those years when you were little. About why everything fell apart and then came back together." I turned to look at her, my heart suddenly beating faster. Part of me didn't want to know, wanted to leave the past buried. But another part of me, the part that had carried questions for years without asking them, needed to understand. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Your father suffered a complete mental breakdown. Clinical depression, severe anxiety, the kind that makes it impossible impossible to function. He'd been struggling for a while before I noticed, hiding it, trying to push through, but eventually it became too much. He couldn't work consistently anymore. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't see any future worth living for. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. We were about to lose everything. The house, our savings, everything we built. The medical bills were piling up. He was seeing doctors, trying different medications. Nothing was working fast enough. We were drowning financially, and I didn't know how to save us. She paused, and I saw her hands clench into fists in her lap. One night, I came home early from visiting my sister. I don't know why I came back early, some instinct maybe, and I found him in the garage with the car running. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't breathe. I knew what she was about to say, but I couldn't process it, couldn't make it real in my mind. He had seriously considered ending his life so the insurance money could save us from financial ruin. He'd convinced himself it was the only way that we'd be better off without him, that he was just a burden dragging us all down. Oh my God, I whispered. Mom. But I stopped him, she continued, her voice fierce now. I got him out of that garage. I held him while he cried, really cried, for the first time since the breakdown started. And I made him a promise. I promised him I would work and save our home myself, that I would carry us through this, that I wouldn't let him give up, and I wouldn't give up on him. Suddenly, everything made sense. The night shift job, the exhaustion, the years of sacrifice. She hadn't just been helping out with finances. She'd been single-handedly holding our entire family together while Dad fought his way back from the edge of an abyss. That's why you work yourself to death, I said, my own tears starting to fall. You were saving his life. She nodded. Every night I went to that warehouse. Every hour of sleep I lost. Every meal I didn't cook. Every moment of exhaustion. It was worth it. Because he's still here. Because our family is still intact. Because he got the time he needed to heal. But you almost died too, I said. You were so sick, Mom. You were disappearing right in front of us. I know, she admitted. There were times I didn't think I could keep going. Times I'd be at work and I'd literally have to hold on to something to keep from collapsing. But then I'd think about finding him in that garage, and I'd find the strength for one more hour, one more shift, one more day. What changed? I asked. Why did you quit when I turned 10? A small smile crossed her face. Your father got better, really better. He found a medication that worked combined with therapy. He was able to go back to work full time. He was able to be a father again, a husband again. He was able to see a future worth living for. Once I knew he was stable, that he wasn't going to slip back into that dark place, I could finally let go. I could finally rest. We sat in silence for a while, processing everything. I thought about all those years, seeing them now through completely different eyes. My father's withdrawal hadn't been weakness or lack of love. It had been illness, a battle being fought inside his own mind. My mother's exhaustion hadn't been martyrdom. It had been pure, fierce love manifesting as action. Does he know I know? I asked finally. Not yet, she said. I wanted to tell you first. You're old enough now to understand. You remember those years. You deserve to know the truth. He must feel so guilty, I said, thinking about my father, about the weight he must carry knowing what his illness put us through. He does, Mom confirmed. We've talked about it a lot over the years. But I've told him the same thing I'm telling you now. There's nothing to feel guilty about. You don't choose to have depression any more than you choose to have cancer. It's an illness, and he fought it with everything he had. I'm proud of him for surviving it. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw her in a completely new light. This woman who had seemed so ordinary, so typical in her role as wife and mother, had actually been a warrior. She had stared into the face of losing everything. Her husband, her home, her family's future, and she had refused to surrender. She had sacrificed everything, her health, her sleep, her happiness, out of pure love for him. You're the strongest person I've ever known, I said, my voice breaking. She reached over and took my hand. No, es with I just loved him enough to do what needed to be done. That's not strength, that's just love. But I knew better. Love and strength aren't separate things. Sometimes love is strength. Sometimes love is working yourself to the bone to save someone who can't save themselves. Sometimes love is staying when every logical part of your brain tells you to run. Sometimes love is believing in someone's recovery even when they've stopped believing in it themselves. That conversation changed everything for me. It reframed my entire childhood, helped me understand the sacrifices that had been made on my behalf, the battles that had been fought while I slept safely in my bed. It made me appreciate my parents in a way I never had before. Not as perfect beings who had it all figured out, but as flawed, struggling humans who loved each other and their children enough to fight through hell and come out the other side. Years have passed since that conversation on the porch. I'm grown now with a family of my own. My brother is in college, thriving. Dad is healthy and happy, successful in his career, actively involved in his grandchildren's lives. Mom is living her best life, painting, traveling, finally taking care of herself after years of taking care of everyone else. But I've never forgotten what she told me that day. I've never forgotten the lesson embedded in her story. That love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. It's showing up even when you're exhausted. It's carrying someone when they can't walk on their own. It's believing in their future even when they can't see it themselves. My mother saved my father's life, not with grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but with years of quiet, determined sacrifice. She worked night shifts in a warehouse so he could have time to heal. She went without sleep so we could have a home. She put her own health and happiness on hold so our family could survive. That's what love looks like sometimes. Not flowers and chocolates and romantic gestures, but exhaustion and sacrifice and choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave. It's not always beautiful or comfortable or easy. Sometimes it's ugly and painful and requires everything you have to give. But it's worth it. Seeing my father now, healthy and whole and fully present in his life. That's proof it was worth it. Seeing my parents together, still in love after weathering a storm that would have destroyed most marriages. That's proof it was worth it. Having an intact family with all its scars and imperfections. That's proof it was worth it. So when people ask me how far I would go to save the person I love, I think about my mother. I think about those years she gave up, that health she risked, those sacrifices she made without hesitation or complaint. And I know the answer. I'd go as far as it takes, just like she did. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe.